Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable member from Haldimand, Norfolk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Canada, we have been blessed with incredible natural resources and abundance. From sea to sea to sea, we have been so richly endowed with our land that produces food and feeds not only Canadians, but the entire world. Our agricultural sector is world-class in sustainability and efficient farming practices. That's the envy of the entire world. Our farmers and agricultural sector are essential to our national prosperity. But, Mr. Speaker, examining the government's policies over the last 9 years, so many farmers have written to me and have asked me a simple question. Is the government trying to put us out of business as farmers? With escalating carbon taxes, restrictive punitive regulations, onerous red tape, and constantly shifting fertilizer rules, many farmers are asking if the Liberal government's objectives is to destroy their farming business, to advance their ideological goals. It's clear that farmers are paying the price of the punitive carbon tax, and Canadians are also seeing skyrocket increases in their grocery bills. What this government has failed to understand, Mr. Speaker, is that when you tax the farmer that grows the food and you tax the trucker that ships the food, you're essentially taxing the Canadians that buy the food. Absolutely. That's just basic economics. That is why Bill C-234 is back in the House and presented again. It will provide a needed carve-out for farmers from the Liberal carbon tax. This carve-out would ensure that farmers are not punished for drying the grain, for heating the barns, and for essential farm operations. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has reported that carbon tax on propane and natural gas used for greenhouses, heating and cooling livestock barns, and drying grain will cost farmers nearly $1 billion by 2030. In Ontario alone, with the April 1st carbon tax increase, farmers will pay $53 million in carbon taxes over the next year. By 2030, they would have paid $566 million in the increased carbon taxes. Mr. Speaker, this is just not affordable, nor is it sustainable. Bill C-234, in its original form, would ensure that $1 billion worth of tax savings goes back into the agricultural sector, so that they can continue to produce the food that feeds Canadians. Let's be clear. The amendments made to the Senate essentially gutted the original bill. There is no point to this bill if these amendments are allowed to stand. There is no evidence put forth on an environmental basis that would support not giving a carve-out to the farmers. The Liberals have always defended this ideological tax by saying that without it, carbon tax emissions will continue to go up, that global temperatures will rise, and that Canada will burn without the carbon tax. Yet, they fail to mention that the Canadian agricultural sector already leads the world in sustainable farming practices. If this government believes that their carbon tax is working, why don't they have measures? Why don't they have a means to measure the impact of this tax on greenhouse gas reductions? Let's not forget the whole point of this carbon tax is to reduce carbon. Right. How can farmers and Canadians trust this government when they don't even believe in the efficacy of their own carbon tax policies because they have no means of measuring how efficient this carbon tax is at actually reducing carbon.
Right.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the Liberal policies have directly contributed to food insecurity in Canada. We're seeing across our nation, even though our nation should have some of the lowest food prices, we're seeing outrageous costs for food. And it's because of that carbon tax on the farmers. Today in Canada, Mr. Speaker, we are witnessing 1 in 4 Canadians skipping meals just to get by. Mr. Speaker, we are seeing families paying $700 more for food this year than they did in 2023. And the unfortunate situation that we're witnessing in food banks of 2 million Canadians actually accessing food banks every single month. This is atrocious. In Haldeman, Norfolk, the community where I reside, the health unit came out with a report earlier this year to warn of the growing number of residents that do not have enough money to buy food, healthy food, for a healthy diet. They said, and I'm quoting them, I'm quoting the report, incomes are not enough to cover even basic expenses. Despite the suffering of Canadians, this government continues to hike the carbon tax every single year. And Mr. Speaker, there's no common sense in that, and there's certainly no compassion. If the Liberal government refuses to axe the carbon tax, at the very least, they must consider supporting this proposal to reject the Senate's amendments to Bill 234. They must pass the important legislation in its original form so that we can get back to supporting farmers and families so that farmers can once again feed Canadians. Because that is what this bill is about, Mr. Speaker. It's about supporting farmers and families. We know that the government could do this tomorrow if they had the political will. We know this because they've done it already. In a few short months ago, the Liberals announced a carve-out to home heating oil. And they know that most people who heat their homes with oil have no viable alternatives. So to tax them would be burdensome and completely wrong. Mr. Speaker, farmers face that same situation, and they are in desperate need of this carve-out.
I hate to interrupt the honourable member from Haldeman, Norfolk in the middle of her speech, but the time provided for the consideration of private members' business has now expired, and the order is dropped to the bottom of the order of precedence on the order paper. When the honourable member, when this debate comes back, the honourable member will have 2 minutes left in her speech.